The glass towers of downtown Chicago stretched toward the October sky, their reflective surfaces catching the golden morning light. Inside the 42nd floor of Sterling & Associates Corporate Consulting, the day was beginning like any other. Coffee machines hummed in break rooms, keyboards clicked in a steady rhythm, and the soft murmur of conference calls drifted through open office doors. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Washington adjusted her navy blazer as she stepped off the elevator, her leather portfolio tucked under her arm. The reception area gleamed with polished marble and modern art, a testament to the firm's success in advising Fortune 500 companies. She'd spent the weekend reviewing case files, financial reports, and strategic assessments that would have challenged seasoned consultants twice her age. At 28, Maya carried herself with a quiet confidence that came from years of academic excellence and professional achievement. Her natural hair was styled in a neat twist, and her shoes clicked softly against the marble as she approached the receptionist's desk. The morning routine felt familiar now. 3 weeks into what everyone believed was a standard business internship program. "Good morning, Sandra," Maya said warmly to the receptionist, a kind woman in her 50s who always arrived early to prepare for the day ahead. "Morning, honey. Coffee's fresh in the break room if you need it," Sandra replied with a genuine smile. "Mr. Blackwood wants to see all the interns in Conference Room B at 9 sharp. Maya nodded, checking her watch. 8:45. She had 15 minutes to settle in and review her notes from yesterday's client strategy session. The Sterling & Associates internship program was highly competitive, drawing candidates from top business schools across the country. What most people didn't know was that Maya's presence here served a purpose far beyond learning corporate consulting. She made her way through the maze of cubicles and corner offices, observing the morning dynamics. Junior associates rushed between departments with stacks of documents. Senior consultants stood around high-tech conference tables, their voices animated as they discussed quarterly projections and market analyses. The energy was infectious, the kind that drove ambitious professionals to work 70-hour weeks in pursuit of partnership tracks and 7-figure bonuses. Maya's assigned workspace sat in the intern pod, a cluster of 6 desks near the research department. Her fellow interns were already settling in, David Chen from Northwestern, studying his laptop screen intently, Rebecca Torres from Georgetown organizing color-coded files, Marcus Johnson from Duke reviewing presentation slides, Elena Petrov from Columbia typing rapidly on her phone, and Tyler Matthews from Yale leaning back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in rooms like this. "Morning, Maya," Rebecca called out, looking up from her meticulously organized desk. "Ready for another day in paradise?" Maya smiled, appreciating Rebecca's dry humor. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd grown to respect her fellow interns. They were bright, ambitious, and surprisingly collaborative despite the competitive environment. Most came from prestigious backgrounds, their resumes filled with internships at Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, and other elite firms. "Always ready," Maya replied, settling into her chair and opening her laptop. The screen displayed her cover identity. Maya Washington, MBA candidate at Chicago Booth School of Business, specializing in organizational behavior and strategic management. The backstory was carefully crafted, complete with academic transcripts, recommendation letters, and a fictional thesis project on corporate culture transformation. What her colleagues didn't know was that Maya's real credentials extended far beyond business school. Her Harvard PhD in organizational psychology sat quietly in a safety deposit box across town, along with her FBI identification and the commendations she'd earned during 5 years of federal service. This internship was part of a carefully orchestrated investigation into corporate fraud, money laundering, and potential federal violations that had caught the Bureau's attention 6 months ago. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the city below. Maya watched delivery trucks navigate the streets, pedestrians hurrying to their destinations, and the Chicago River reflecting light like scattered diamonds. From this height, the world seemed orderly, predictable, but she knew that beneath the surface of institutions like Sterling & Associates, corruption could flourish in the shadows of respectability and success. Her assignment was delicate, requiring her to blend seamlessly into the corporate environment while gathering intelligence on specific executives suspected of financial crimes. The FBI had spent months establishing her cover identity. creating a digital footprint that would withstand scrutiny from background checks and casual investigation. She'd even attended several Booth School networking events to build credible connections within the business community. Tyler stretched and yawned, drawing Maya's attention back to the present moment. Anyone know what Blackwood wants to discuss this morning? Hopefully not another lecture about billable hours and client expectations. David looked up from his screen. Probably the Henderson Industries project. I heard from Jennifer in accounting that they're bringing in a major new client this week. Maya had heard similar rumors. Henderson Industries was a manufacturing conglomerate with operations across 3 states. The kind of complex organization that required extensive financial restructuring and strategic planning. For a consulting firm like Sterling and Associates, landing Henderson would represent millions in revenue over the next 2 years. Elena finished her phone call and rejoined the conversation. My cousin works at Henderson's Detroit facility, says there have been some unusual management changes lately. New CFO, new compliance director, that sort of thing. Maya filed the information away, her mind automatically cataloging details that might prove relevant to her investigation. Henderson Industries had appeared in several bureau files related to suspicious financial transactions, though nothing concrete enough to warrant direct action. If Sterling and Associates was about to begin working closely with Henderson, it could provide valuable insight into both organizations. Marcus closed his presentation slides and turned his chair to face the group. Whatever it is, I'm just hoping for more substantial work. I didn't come here to make copies and fetch coffee for the rest of the summer. Maya understood his frustration. The internship program had been surprisingly substantive, involving real client work and strategic analysis rather than typical entry-level busy work. She'd contributed to 3 major projects already, her insights earning quiet recognition from several senior associates. The challenge was maintaining her cover while demonstrating enough competence to gain access to higher-level information. Rebecca checked her watch. 5 minutes until the meeting. Should we head over? Quote. The group gathered their materials and made their way toward Conference Room B, a sleek space with a polished mahogany table and leather chairs that could seat 20 people comfortably. Maya had attended several meetings here over the past weeks, watching how power dynamics played out among different levels of the corporate hierarchy. As they walked, Maya caught glimpses of the executive offices lining the perimeter of the floor. Corner offices with panoramic city views belong to partners and senior vice presidents, their doors usually closed during important calls or client meetings. The nameplate outside the largest office read, Richard Blackwood, Senior Partner, and Maya had been studying his patterns for weeks. Blackwood was in his late 50s, a Harvard Business School graduate who'd built Sterling and Associates into one of Chicago's most influential consulting firms. His client list included major corporations, government contractors, and international conglomerates. On the surface, he appeared to be exactly what he claimed, a successful businessman with impeccable credentials and a reputation for delivering results. But Maya's investigation had uncovered inconsistencies in the firm's financial reporting, unusual patterns in client billing, and suspicious relationships with offshore entities. Nothing definitive yet, but enough red flags to justify the Bureau's interest and her extended assignment. The intern group reached Conference Room B just as the clock struck 9. Through the glass walls, Maya could see Blackwood arranging documents at the head of the table, his silver hair perfectly styled, and his charcoal suit tailored to perfection. He moved with the confident efficiency of someone accustomed to commanding attention and respect. Maya took a seat halfway down the table, positioning herself where she could observe both Blackwood and the other interns clearly. Her training had taught her to read rooms quickly, identifying power structures, alliance patterns, and potential pressure points that might prove useful later. This morning would bring new developments, new opportunities to gather intelligence, and new challenges to maintaining her carefully constructed cover. But Maya had faced more dangerous situations than corporate conference rooms. Her FBI training had prepared her for environments where a single misstep could compromise months of work or put lives at risk. As Blackwood looked up from his documents and prepared to address the group, Maya felt the familiar alertness that came with high-stakes undercover work. Today would test her ability to balance her role as an eager intern with her mission as a federal investigator. The game was about to begin. Richard Blackwood entered Conference Room B with the commanding presence of someone who owned every space he occupied. His Italian leather shoes made no sound against the polished floor, but his arrival shifted the energy in the room immediately. The 6 interns straightened in their chairs, conversations dying mid-sentence. "Good morning," Blackwood said, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in corporate consulting. He didn't smile, didn't offer pleasantries. Instead, he opened a thick file folder and spread several documents across the mahogany table. "Today marks a significant milestone for Sterling and Associates, and by extension, for your internship experience." Maya watched him carefully, noting the way he commanded attention without raising his voice. His movements were precise, calculated. Everything about Richard Blackwood suggested a man who had never been told no, never been questioned, never had his authority challenged in any meaningful way. "Henderson Industries has officially signed with us for a complete organizational restructuring," Blackwood continued, tapping one of the documents with his Mont Blanc pen. "This represents a $40 million contract over 18 months, the largest single engagement in our firm's history." David leaned forward slightly, his interest obvious. "What's our role in the project, Mr. Blackwood?" "You'll be supporting various aspects of the due diligence process," Blackwood replied. "Financial analysis, operational assessments, compliance reviews. The kind of work that separates serious consultants from academic theorists." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya recognized the subtle dig at their student status. Blackwood had a reputation for testing interns, pushing them to prove their worth beyond classroom knowledge. She'd observed him during previous meetings, watching how he evaluated responses, measured competence, and decided who deserved his attention. Elena raised her hand tentatively. "Will we be working directly with Henderson's executive team?" "Some of you will," Blackwood said, his gaze sweeping across the table. "This project requires discretion, professionalism, and absolute attention to detail. Henderson's board has concerns about potential regulatory scrutiny, so our work must be impeccable." Maya's pulse quickened slightly. Regulatory scrutiny suggested the kind of compliance issues that often interested federal investigators. She maintained her neutral expression while mentally noting the comment for her evening report to the Bureau. "I'll be assigning specific roles based on demonstrated capabilities," Blackwood continued. "Marcus, you'll focus on operational efficiency metrics. Elena, financial reconciliation. David, technology integration assessments. Rebecca, human resources compliance. Tyler, strategic market positioning." Maya waited, realizing her name hadn't been called. The silence stretched for several seconds before Blackwood's eyes settled on her with unmistakable dismissiveness. "Ms. Washington," he said, pronouncing her name with slight emphasis. "You'll be handling administrative support, document organization, meeting scheduling, basic data entry, the foundation work that keeps projects running smoothly." The condescension in his tone was subtle, but unmistakable. Maya felt the familiar sting of being underestimated, reduced to clerical tasks, while her peers received substantive analytical assignments. She'd experienced this pattern throughout her career, in academic settings, corporate environments, and even within federal agencies where her credentials should have commanded respect. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mr. Blackwood, Maya's been doing excellent analytical work on the Peterson account. Maybe she could." "Mr. Matthews," Blackwood interrupted, his voice carrying a warning edge. "I appreciate your concern for your colleague, but I make assignment decisions based on observed capabilities and organizational needs. Ms. Washington will contribute where she's best suited." The room fell silent. Maya could feel her fellow interns' discomfort, their awareness that something wasn't right about the situation. Rebecca's jaw tightened slightly. David stared at his hands. Marcus frowned, but didn't speak. Maya kept her expression neutral, though internally she was cataloging every nuance of Blackwood's behavior. His dismissal wasn't random or based on performance metrics. Her work on previous projects had been exemplary, earning positive feedback from multiple senior associates. This was something else entirely. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," Maya said evenly. "I'm happy to contribute however you think best." Her calm response seemed to surprise him. He'd expected pushback, defensiveness, perhaps tears or anger. Instead, Maya projected the same professional composure she'd maintained during FBI interrogations of suspected terrorists and organized crime figures. Blackwood continued with project details, outlining timelines, deliverables, and client expectations. Maya listened carefully, noting names, relationships, and financial figures that might prove relevant to her investigation. Henderson Industries' connection to Sterling and Associates was becoming more interesting by the minute. The Henderson executives will be visiting our offices Thursday for initial presentations, Blackwood explained. I expect polished professional work from everyone involved. This client relationship could define our firm's trajectory for the next decade. As the meeting progressed, Maya observed the dynamic between Blackwood and her fellow interns. He treated Tyler with collegial respect, engaging him in strategic discussions about market positioning. David received detailed guidance on technology assessments. Rebecca and Elena were given complex analytical frameworks to implement. But when Maya asked a clarifying question about Henderson's compliance history, Blackwood's response was curt and dismissive. That's not your concern, Ms. Washington. Focus on your assigned administrative tasks. The comment hung in the air like smoke. Maya had asked a sophisticated question about regulatory requirements that demonstrated deep understanding of corporate compliance issues. Any reasonable supervisor would have recognized the insight behind her inquiry. Instead, Blackwood had shut her down with barely concealed impatience. Elena glanced at Maya sympathetically, clearly recognizing the unfairness of the interaction. Marcus looked troubled, his usual easy confidence replaced by obvious discomfort. The meeting was revealing uncomfortable truths about how opportunities were distributed within the firm. Blackwood began distributing specific project materials to each intern, thick folders containing confidential client information, financial data, and strategic assessments. Maya watched as her colleagues received substantial packages filled with complex analytical tasks and high-level documentation. When Blackwood reached her position, he placed a thin folder on the table. Maya opened it to find basic administrative templates, meeting agenda formats, travel itinerary layouts, and expense report forms. The contrast with her colleagues' materials was stark and intentional. Questions? Blackwood asked, his tone suggesting he preferred there wouldn't be any. Tyler looked like he wanted to say something, but Maya caught his eye and shook her head almost imperceptibly. She'd handle this her own way, in her own time. Speaking up now would only create more problems without solving the underlying issue. No questions, Maya replied calmly. Blackwood gathered his remaining documents, checking his Rolex with practiced efficiency. Good. I'll expect preliminary reports from each of you by Friday afternoon. Ms. Washington, please coordinate the scheduling logistics for Thursday's client presentation. Conference Room A, starting at 10 a.m. He turned toward the door, then paused as if remembering something important. Without looking back, he addressed the room with casual authority. One more thing. This project involves sensitive financial information and strategic planning that could impact Henderson's stock price if mishandled. I trust everyone understands the importance of discretion. His eyes found Maya in the reflection of the conference room's glass wall. Some information is simply too valuable to trust with everyone. The message was clear, delivered with corporate politeness that couldn't disguise its true meaning. Maya was being excluded not just from meaningful work, but from the trust and respect automatically extended to her colleagues. As Blackwood left the conference room, the interns sat in uncomfortable silence. The morning light had shifted, casting long shadows across the mahogany table. Outside, Chicago's business district hummed with activity. Millions of people pursuing their ambitions within systems that didn't always reward merit equally. Maya closed her thin folder and stood to leave. Her colleagues exchanged worried glances, clearly aware that something significant had just occurred. The equity she'd been denied was obvious to everyone present, but addressing it directly would require courage that most people struggled to find in corporate environments. Maya, Rebecca said quietly as they filed out of the conference room. That wasn't right. Maya's smile was genuine but controlled. It's fine, Rebecca. I've dealt with worse. But as she walked back toward the intern pod, Maya's mind was already working on multiple levels. Blackwood's behavior revealed important information about the firm's culture and his personal character. More importantly, his exclusion of her from sensitive Henderson Industries materials suggested there might be something worth hiding in those documents. The investigation had just taken an interesting turn. The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur of awkward conversations and meaningful glances. Maya threw herself into the administrative tasks Blackwood had assigned, but her fellow interns couldn't shake their discomfort with what they'd witnessed. During lunch in the firm's executive dining room, the tension was palpable. I can't stop thinking about this morning, Elena said, picking at her Caesar salad. The way he spoke to you, Maya, it wasn't professional. David nodded, pushing food around his plate without eating. I've been here 3 weeks, and I've never seen him treat anyone like that, not even the junior associates when they mess up. Maya appreciated their concern, but she also recognized the delicate position they were in. Speaking up against a senior partner required courage that could impact their future careers. In the corporate world, loyalty often mattered more than justice. It's really okay, Maya said, though she was carefully cataloging every detail for her evening report to the bureau. Sometimes these things happen. I'll prove myself through my work. Tyler leaned forward, his voice lowered. That's just it, though. You already have proven yourself. The Peterson analysis you did last week was brilliant. Jennifer from accounting told me it saved them 40 hours of work. Rebecca put down her fork decisively. We should talk to someone, maybe Linda in HR, or one of the other partners. Maya shook her head gently. I don't want to make waves, not yet. What she didn't say was that Blackwood's behavior was actually useful to her investigation. His willingness to exclude her from sensitive materials suggested there was something worth hiding. The FBI had sent her here to uncover financial crimes, and discrimination often went hand in hand with other ethical violations. Wednesday morning brought new challenges. Maya arrived early, as had become her habit, and found Blackwood's assistant, Patricia, waiting by her desk with a stack of papers. Mr. Blackwood needs these copied and collated for the Henderson presentation, Patricia said apologetically. 50 sets, bound and tabbed. He wants them ready by 3 p.m. Maya glanced at the stack. Easily 300 pages of financial documents, organizational charts, and strategic analyses. The kind of work typically handled by administrative staff, not graduate-level interns. Of course, Maya replied, accepting the documents. I'll get started right away. As Patricia hurried away, Maya noticed Tyler approaching from the elevator bank. His expression was troubled, and she could see him working up the courage to say something. Maya, this is ridiculous, he said when he reached her desk. I'm going to talk to Blackwood myself. This is busy work that any temp could handle. Tyler, please don't, Maya said firmly. I can handle this. But Tyler was already walking toward Blackwood's corner office, his jaw set with determination. Maya watched through the glass walls as he knocked on Blackwood's door, entered, and began speaking animatedly. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes, and Tyler emerged, looking frustrated and defeated. When he returned to Maya's desk, his face was flushed. He basically told me to mind my own business, said the assignments were based on performance metrics and organizational fit that I couldn't possibly understand. Maya felt a familiar anger building in her chest, but she channeled it into focus. What exactly did he say? He said some people need to earn respect through hard work and dedication, not assume they deserve it based on academic credentials. Tyler's voice was tight with barely controlled frustration. Then he made some comment about how diverse hiring initiatives sometimes created unrealistic expectations. The comment hit Maya like a physical blow, but she'd heard similar language throughout her career. The suggestion that her presence was the result of diversity initiatives rather than merit was a familiar weapon used to undermine accomplished women of color in professional settings. Marcus and Rebecca approached, having overheard part of the conversation. Marcus looked genuinely angry, his usual laid-back demeanor replaced by rigid tension. He actually said that, Marcus asked, about diversity initiatives? Tyler nodded grimly, pretty much word for word. Rebecca's hands were clenched into fists. That's textbook discrimination. Maya, you have to report this. Maya looked around at her colleagues, seeing their outrage and support, but also understanding the complexity of the situation better than they did. As an FBI agent, she'd encountered far worse behavior than Blackwood's casual racism. As an undercover operative, she needed to maintain her cover while gathering intelligence on potential federal crimes. I appreciate you all standing up for me, Maya said carefully, but I need to handle this strategically. What she couldn't tell them was that she was already building a case, not just against Blackwood's discriminatory behavior, but against potential financial crimes that could result in federal charges. Every interaction was being documented, every slight recorded for future use. Thursday morning arrived with heightened tension throughout the office. The Henderson Industries executives were scheduled to arrive at 10 a.m. for their presentation, and the entire firm buzzed with nervous energy. Maya had spent the previous day meticulously preparing materials, coordinating logistics, and ensuring every detail was perfect. She arrived at 7:30 to find the conference room setup already underway. Catering staff arranged coffee service and continental breakfast. IT technicians tested projection equipment and video conferencing systems. Everything had to be flawless for the $40 million client. Maya was reviewing the agenda for the third time when Blackwood arrived, impeccably dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He surveyed the conference room setup with critical eyes, checking every detail. "Ms. Washington," he said without looking at her directly, "the Henderson executives will expect complete professionalism today. No questions, no interruptions, no attempts to insert yourself into conversations above your level." The condescension in his voice was more blatant than before, as if Maya's presence was an inconvenience he was forced to tolerate. She nodded calmly, maintaining the same professional demeanor that had served her well during undercover operations in far more dangerous situations. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. I'll make sure everything runs smoothly." At 9:45, the Henderson Industries delegation arrived. 3 executives in expensive suits, accompanied by their own assistants and legal counsel. Maya watched from the back of the conference room as introductions were made, hands shaken and pleasantries exchanged. The lead Henderson executive was Robert Sterling, a man in his 60s with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of employees. His CFO, Jennifer Hayes, was younger but equally polished, her questions precise and financially focused. The third executive, Compliance Director Michael Torres, seemed more reserved, taking careful notes and asking pointed questions about regulatory oversight. As the presentation began, Maya positioned herself near the back of the room where she could observe without drawing attention. Blackwood commanded the presentation with his usual authority, walking through strategic recommendations, financial projections, and implementation timelines. But Maya's trained eye caught details others missed. She noticed Sterling and Blackwood exchanging glances that suggested prior communication beyond official channels. She observed Hayes asking questions about specific accounting treatments that seemed designed to test Sterling and Associates' willingness to push ethical boundaries. Most importantly, she heard Torres expressing concerns about regulatory visibility that suggested Henderson Industries was already under some form of government scrutiny. Halfway through the presentation, one of the Henderson assistants needed additional copies of a financial appendix. Maya quietly slipped out to make copies, but as she passed the break room, she overheard Blackwood speaking in hushed tones with Sterling. "The federal audit trail has been cleaned up," Blackwood was saying. "Your offshore arrangements won't show up in any domestic filings." Sterling's response was equally quiet but clear. "Good. The Justice Department inquiry died last month, but we can't afford any new attention." Maya continued walking toward the copy machine, her pulse quickening. She'd just overheard potential evidence of federal crimes: obstruction of justice, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud the government. This was exactly what the Bureau had suspected when they'd assigned her to infiltrate Sterling and Associates. When she returned with the copied documents, Blackwood barely acknowledged her presence. He was focused entirely on impressing the Henderson executives, demonstrating Sterling and Associates' ability to navigate complex regulatory environments while protecting client interests. But Maya noticed something else during the second half. Torres, the compliance director, kept glancing at her with curious interest. Not the dismissive looks she'd grown accustomed to from Blackwood, but genuine curiosity about who she was and what she was doing there. After the Henderson delegation left, the Sterling and Associates team gathered for a debriefing. Blackwood was clearly pleased with how the presentation had gone, his confidence evident as he addressed the group. "Excellent work, everyone," he said, though his eyes skipped over Maya entirely. "I believe we've secured Henderson's confidence in our ability to handle their unique requirements." Tyler raised his hand. "What about the regulatory concerns Torres mentioned? Should we be prepared for additional compliance reviews?" Blackwood's expression tightened slightly. "That's a senior-level consideration, Mr. Matthews, nothing that affects your scope of work." Maya made a mental note of Blackwood's evasiveness. In her experience, when executives avoided discussing regulatory issues, it usually meant they had something to hide. As the meeting concluded and people began filing out, Maya felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Jennifer from accounting, a kind woman in her 40s who'd always been friendly during their brief interactions. "Maya, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" They stepped into an empty conference room and Jennifer closed the door behind them. Her expression was serious, concerned. "I've been working here for 8 years, Jennifer said quietly. "I've seen a lot of interns come and go. What's happening to you isn't normal, and it isn't right." Maya appreciated the support, but she sensed Jennifer had something more specific to share. "I notice things," Jennifer continued. "Financial irregularities, unusual account transfers, meetings that don't appear on official calendars. Blackwood's behavior toward you is part of a larger pattern of protecting information from people he doesn't trust." Maya's interest sharpened, though she kept her expression neutral. "What kind of irregularities?" Jennifer glanced toward the door, then back at Maya, the kind that might interest someone with the right background to understand them. The comment was careful, almost coded, as if Jennifer suspected there was more to Maya's presence at Sterling & Associates than a simple internship. Maya filed the conversation away for immediate inclusion in her evening report to the Bureau. The investigation was accelerating faster than anyone expected. Friday morning brought an unexpected development that would change everything. Maya arrived at the office to find 2 men in dark suits waiting in the lobby, their posture and alertness immediately familiar to her trained eye. Federal agents. Her pulse quickened as she recognized the potential complications this could create for her carefully maintained cover. The reception area buzzed with nervous energy. Sandra looked flustered as she fielded phone calls, and several junior associates whispered anxiously near the elevator banks. Maya approached her desk casually, but her mind was racing through possibilities. Had someone discovered her true identity? Was this a coordinated bureau operation she hadn't been informed about? "Maya," Rebecca called out from across the intern pod, her voice tight with concern. "Have you heard what's happening?" Before Maya could respond, Tyler appeared at her elbow, his face pale. "Federal investigators are here. Something about financial irregularities and potential fraud charges." Maya felt a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal concern. The investigation she'd been conducting was apparently converging with other federal actions. But her cover identity as an intern could be blown if the visiting agents recognized her or if Blackwood discovered her true credentials during the chaos. "What kind of financial irregularities?" Maya asked, maintaining her role as a concerned intern while mentally calculating her next moves. Marcus joined their huddle, his voice lowered. "Jennifer from accounting said they're looking at the Henderson Industries contract specifically. Something about money laundering and offshore accounts." Maya's blood ran cold. The conversation she'd overheard between Blackwood and Sterling was apparently part of a larger federal investigation that had been running parallel to her own undercover assignment. The Bureau sometimes operated multiple investigations simultaneously without full coordination between teams. Elena appeared from the break room, her face flushed with excitement and fear. "I just saw them go into Blackwood's office with a stack of documents. This is serious." Through the glass walls, Maya could see Blackwood's corner office filled with activity. The 2 federal agents were seated across from his desk, while Blackwood gestured animatedly, his usual composed demeanor cracking under pressure. A third person, a woman in a navy suit carrying a briefcase, stood near the window taking notes. Maya recognized the woman immediately. Special Agent Sarah Chen, a senior investigator from the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division. They'd worked together on a money laundering case 2 years earlier, and Chen knew Maya's real identity and FBI credentials. The situation was becoming dangerous for Maya's cover. If Chen recognized her, or if the investigation required her to reveal her true identity, months of undercover work could be compromised. But she also realized that this might be the perfect opportunity to gather additional evidence while everyone's attention was focused on the federal agents. "I need to use the restroom," Maya said, excusing herself from the group of anxious interns. Instead of heading to the facilities, she made her way toward the administrative wing where personnel files were kept. With security focused on the federal agents and staff distracted by the unfolding drama, this might be her only chance to access records that could support both investigations. Maya's FBI training had taught her to move through office environments without drawing attention. She walked purposefully but not hurriedly, nodding politely to colleagues she passed while mentally mapping the most efficient route to the records room. The personnel office was empty, its usual occupant probably gathered with other staff members trying to understand what was happening with the federal investigation. Maya slipped inside and quickly located the filing system she'd been observing for weeks. Her hands moved efficiently through folders marked Henderson Industries, Offshore Consulting, and Regulatory Compliance. The documents she found painted a clear picture of systematic financial crimes. fabricated invoices, hidden accounts, and deliberate misrepresentation of client relationships to avoid federal oversight. Most damaging was a series of email printouts showing direct communication between Blackwood and Henderson executives about concealing assets from Justice Department investigators. Maya photographed several key pages with her phone, evidence that would prove invaluable when combined with her recorded observations of discriminatory behavior. A sound in the hallway made her freeze. Footsteps approached the personnel office, accompanied by voices she didn't recognize. Maya quickly returned the files to their original positions and moved toward the door, preparing to leave as naturally as possible. But as she reached for the handle, the door opened to reveal Special Agent Chen, accompanied by a Sterling and Associates compliance officer Maya had seen but never met directly. "Ms. Washington," Chen said, her expression carefully neutral, "what brings you to the personnel office?" Maya felt the weight of the moment. Chen's presence here, combined with her use of Maya's cover name, suggested this encounter wasn't accidental. The senior agent was giving her an opportunity to maintain her cover while acknowledging their shared federal connection. "I was looking for employee handbook information," Maya replied smoothly. "Some questions about the internship program structure." The compliance officer, a nervous man in his 50s, looked between Maya and Chen with obvious confusion. "I can help you with that later, Ms. Washington. Right now, we need this area secured for the federal investigation." Chen nodded professionally. "Of course. Ms. Washington, perhaps you could return to your assigned workspace for now." As Maya left the personnel office, Chen's eyes met hers briefly. The look conveyed a clear message: maintain your cover, but be ready for developments. Maya returned to the intern pod to find her colleagues in full speculation mode. The federal agents were still in Blackwood's office, and rumors were spreading throughout the firm about potential arrests, seized records, and criminal charges. "This is insane," David said, pacing nervously between desks. "I mean, we've been working on Henderson Industries projects. Does this make us witnesses or something?" Tyler was staring at his laptop screen, probably updating his resume and LinkedIn profile. "I'm just hoping this doesn't tank our future job prospects. Having a federal investigation on your internship record can't be good." Rebecca had gone quiet, her usual confident demeanor replaced by thoughtful concern. Maya noticed her reviewing documents from the Henderson project, as if trying to identify red flags she might have missed. Around 11:30, the activity in Blackwood's office intensified. Maya watched through the glass walls as additional federal agents arrived, followed by representatives from the U.S. Attorney's Office carrying bankers' boxes and evidence bags. The sight sent a ripple of panic through the firm. Junior associates began calling their personal attorneys. Senior partners held hushed conversations behind closed doors. Administrative staff whispered about updating their resumes and finding new positions. Maya felt a strange mixture of professional satisfaction and personal vindication. The federal investigation was validating her months of careful intelligence gathering, but it was also exposing the toxic culture that had enabled both financial crimes and discriminatory behavior to flourish unchecked. At noon, Blackwood emerged from his office, flanked by federal agents. His hands were cuffed behind his back, his expensive suit wrinkled from stress, and his face pale with the realization that his world was collapsing around him. The intern pod fell silent as they watched the scene unfold. Blackwood's arrest was being conducted with professional efficiency, but the symbolism was unmistakable. The man who had wielded power with casual cruelty was now powerless himself, his authority stripped away by federal law enforcement. As the group passed Maya's desk, Blackwood's eyes found hers. For a moment, his expression showed confusion, as if he was trying to understand how the quiet intern he'd dismissed and demeaned could be sitting calmly while his career crumbled around him. Maya met his gaze with the same professional composure she'd maintained throughout weeks of discrimination and condescension. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't show any emotion beyond quiet dignity. But Blackwood seemed to sense something in her calm confidence that unsettled him. His steps faltered slightly as understanding began to dawn. The intern he'd underestimated, excluded, and insulted might be more than she appeared. Special Agent Chen appeared at Maya's desk as Blackwood was escorted toward the elevators. Her timing seemed casual, but Maya recognized it as carefully orchestrated. "Ms. Washington," Chen said loudly enough for nearby colleagues to hear, "we'll need to interview all interns who worked on Henderson Industries projects. Can you come with me for a preliminary discussion?" Maya nodded, gathering her belongings with practiced calm. As she stood to follow Chen, her fellow interns watched with mixture of concern and curiosity. They'd witnessed weeks of discriminatory treatment, seen her excluded from meaningful work, watched her handle professional insults with grace. Now federal agents were specifically requesting her involvement in their investigation. The pieces weren't adding up to the simple narrative of an overlooked intern, and Maya could see questions forming in their minds. Elena leaned forward as Maya prepared to leave. "Maya, is everything going to be okay?" Maya's smile was genuine, but enigmatic. Everything's going to be exactly as it should be. As she walked toward the elevator with Special Agent Chen, Maya felt the weight of months of careful preparation coming to fruition. The investigation was entering its final phase, and soon everyone would understand exactly who Maya Washington really was and why she'd been watching, listening, and documenting everything from the very beginning. The elevator doors closed, leaving her colleagues with their questions and growing suspicions. In a few hours, those questions would be answered in ways that would reshape their understanding of justice, power, and the quiet strength of someone they'd drastically underestimated. The elevator descended in silence, carrying Maya and Special Agent Chen toward a confrontation that would shatter every assumption her colleagues had made about the quiet intern from Chicago booth. Maya's heart rate remained steady, her FBI training keeping her calm even as months of careful preparation reached their climax. "Conference Room C is secured for debriefing," Chen said quietly as they reached the lobby level. "Agent Martinez is waiting with your handler from the bureau." Maya nodded, understanding that her undercover assignment was about to transition into its final phase. Through the elevator's glass panels, she could see the chaos unfolding throughout Sterling and Associates. Federal agents moved efficiently through offices, seizing computers and filing cabinets while employees watched in stunned silence. Conference Room C had been transformed into a temporary FBI command center. Laptops displayed financial records. Whiteboards showed organizational charts connecting Sterling and Associates to various offshore entities, and evidence boxes lined the walls. Agent Rodriguez, Maya's bureau handler, looked up from a stack of documents as they entered. "Agent Washington," Rodriguez said with a slight smile, "outstanding work. Your intelligence reports were instrumental in building this case." Maya felt a wave of professional satisfaction, but also relief that her months of maintaining a false identity were finally over. She successfully infiltrated Sterling and Associates, documented systematic financial crimes, and gathered evidence of discriminatory practices that would support both federal charges and civil rights violations. "The Henderson Industries connection was the breakthrough we needed," Maya replied, settling into a chair at the conference table. "Blackwood's offshore arrangements with Sterling violated about 6 different federal statutes." Chen opened her laptop and pulled up recorded conversations from the previous day. "We've been monitoring their communications since your report about the Justice Department inquiry comments. Classic obstruction of justice, plus money laundering charges that could put Blackwood away for 15 years. Maya reviewed the evidence packages she'd assembled over 3 months of careful observation. Financial irregularities, discriminatory behavior patterns, client relationship violations, and regulatory compliance failures painted a comprehensive picture of corruption at Sterling and Associates. "What about the discrimination documentation?" Maya asked. "The way Blackwood treated me wasn't just personal prejudice. It was part of a systematic pattern of excluding people from sensitive information based on racial bias." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "We've got enough for federal civil rights charges, plus the firm will face massive liability exposure. Your recorded conversations and witness statements from other interns create an ironclad case." Through the conference room's glass walls, Maya could see her fellow interns gathered in the main lobby, their faces reflecting confusion and growing realization that something extraordinary was happening. Tyler kept glancing toward Conference Room C, clearly wondering why Maya had been specifically requested for federal questioning. "They're starting to figure it out," Chen observed, following Maya's gaze. "Your colleagues know something doesn't add up about the intern who got singled out by federal agents." Quote, Maya felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension about revealing her true identity to people who'd supported her during weeks of discriminatory treatment. Tyler, Rebecca, Elena, David, and Marcus had shown genuine courage in standing up for her, unaware that she was a federal agent building a criminal case. "I think it's time," Maya said decisively. They deserve to know the truth, especially after everything they witnessed. Rodriguez consulted his watch and nodded. The arrest warrants are being executed now. Sterling's being taken into custody at Henderson Industries headquarters, and we've seized their offshore account records. Your cover identity is no longer necessary. Maya took a deep breath, preparing for a conversation that would transform her relationships with 5 people who'd become genuine friends over the past 3 months. She'd grown to respect their integrity, appreciate their support, and value their friendship beyond the requirements of her undercover assignment. Bring them in, Maya said, all 5 interns. It's time they understood who I really am and why I've been here. Chen left the conference room to collect Maya's colleagues while she prepared for the most challenging part of her assignment, explaining to people who'd trusted her that she'd been deceiving them for months, even for the best of reasons. 5 minutes later, the conference room door opened to admit Tyler, Rebecca, Elena, David, and Marcus. Their expressions ranged from confused to worried, to intensely curious. They'd clearly been speculating about Maya's extended absence and the federal agent's specific interest in her testimony. "Please, sit down," Maya said gently, gesturing to chairs around the conference table. "I have something important to tell you all." Tyler leaned forward, his concern obvious. "Maya, are you in some kind of trouble? Do you need a lawyer?" Maya's smile was genuine but tinged with the complexity of what she was about to reveal. "No, Tyler, I'm not in trouble, but I haven't been entirely honest about who I am." She reached into her briefcase and withdrew 2 items that would change everything: her Harvard PhD diploma in organizational psychology and her FBI credentials bearing her real photograph and federal identification number. "My name is Dr. Maya Washington," she said, placing both items on the conference table where everyone could see them clearly. "I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and for the past 3 months I've been conducting an undercover investigation into financial crimes at Sterling and Associates." The silence that followed was deafening. 5 faces stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to dawning understanding. Elena's mouth fell open. David blinked rapidly as if trying to process impossible information. Marcus leaned back in his chair, stunned. Rebecca was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your FBI?" Maya nodded, understanding the magnitude of what she was revealing. "I have a PhD from Harvard in organizational psychology and 5 years of experience in federal law enforcement. The Bureau assigned me to investigate suspected financial crimes and regulatory violations at Sterling and Associates." Tyler's eyes moved between Maya's FBI credentials and her Harvard diploma, his mind clearly racing through weeks of interactions that suddenly made sense in an entirely different context. "The way you handled Blackwood's discrimination, you weren't just being professional, you were gathering evidence." "Every conversation was documented," Maya confirmed. "Every instance of discriminatory behavior, every exclusion from meetings, every inappropriate comment. It all goes into the federal case we're building." Elena found her voice, though it shook slightly. "The Henderson Industries project. You knew something was wrong from the beginning." Maya's expression grew serious. The Bureau had been monitoring suspicious financial transactions between Sterling and Associates and several offshore entities for months. My assignment was to gather evidence from inside the firm to support federal charges. David leaned forward, his analytical mind working through implications. "That's why you ask those sophisticated questions about compliance and regulatory issues. You weren't just a curious intern, you were conducting a federal investigation." "Your questions were often more insightful than those of senior associates," Maya acknowledged. "You all contributed to this investigation without knowing it. Your observations about unusual client relationships and suspicious financial patterns helped confirm what we suspected." Marcus whistled low, shaking his head in amazement. "Dr. Maya Washington, FBI Special Agent. I can't believe we've been calling you just Maya for 3 months." Quote. Rebecca's expression had shifted from shock to something approaching admiration. "The way you handled Blackwood's treatment. You could have destroyed him at any moment, but you let him hang himself with his own behavior." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Federal investigations require patience and thorough documentation. Blackwood's discriminatory behavior was evidence of a larger pattern of ethical violations that supported our financial crimes case." Tyler looked troubled, wrestling with complex emotions. "We defended you, supported you, stood up for you, but you didn't need our protection. You were never the vulnerable intern we thought you were." Maya's response was immediate and heartfelt. "I absolutely needed your support, Tyler. Not because I was vulnerable, but because what you all did was right. You stood up against discrimination when you thought someone was being treated unfairly. That speaks to your character, not to whether I needed protection. Elena was studying Maya's Harvard diploma with obvious respect. Organizational psychology, PhD from Harvard. That explains how you understood the firm's power dynamics so quickly. My doctoral research focused on institutional bias and discriminatory practices in corporate environments, Maya explained. Sterling & Associates was a textbook case of how financial corruption and discriminatory behavior often exist side by side. The conference room door opened to admit Agent Rodriguez, who'd been monitoring their conversation from the adjacent room. His expression was grave as he addressed the group. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been a significant development," Rodriguez said. "Robert Sterling from Henderson Industries has agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. He's providing testimony about Blackwood's role in money laundering operations." Maya felt a surge of professional satisfaction. Sterling's cooperation would strengthen the federal case considerably and likely lead to additional arrests within both organizations. "What does this mean for the firm?" Rebecca asked, her practical nature asserting itself. Rodriguez consulted his notes. "Sterling & Associates will face federal charges for money laundering, fraud, and civil rights violations. The firm will likely be dissolved, with assets seized to pay restitution to victims." Tyler looked directly at Maya, his respect obvious, despite his continued processing of her revealed identity. "You've been building this case for months. Watching, documenting, gathering evidence while we thought you were just trying to survive an internship." Maya's smile acknowledged the irony. "Some of my best evidence came from observing how you all reacted to injustice. Your willingness to stand up for what you thought was right demonstrated that not everyone at Sterling & Associates was complicit in the corruption." Elena shook her head in amazement. "Harvard PhD and FBI credentials. Meanwhile, Blackwood was treating you like you didn't belong in first-class business settings." Richard Blackwood's assumptions about who deserved respect and authority ultimately led to his downfall, Maya observed. "He excluded me from sensitive information because of his prejudices, never realizing that I was exactly the person who could understand its criminal implications." As the reality of Maya's true identity settled over her former colleagues, their expression shifted from shock to admiration, to deep respect for what she'd accomplished. The quiet intern they'd defended had been a federal agent all along, building a case that would transform their understanding of justice and accountability. But Maya could see in their faces that her revelation raised new questions about trust, deception, and the complex nature of undercover work that saved lives and protected society from corruption. 2 weeks after Blackwood's arrest, the ripple effects of Maya's investigation transformed not just Sterling & Associates, but the entire Chicago business community. The federal charges made national headlines, sparking conversations about corporate accountability, systemic discrimination, and the hidden costs of prejudice in professional environments. Maya sat in FBI headquarters downtown, reviewing case files and preparing testimony for the federal grand jury. Through her office window, she could see protesters gathering outside the courthouse, where Blackwood's preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following morning. Signs read "Justice for All" and "End Corporate Discrimination," evidence that her undercover work had ignited broader social awareness. Agent Rodriguez knocked on her doorframe. "The U.S. Attorney wants to discuss your testimony strategy." Sterling's cooperation has opened up connections to 3 other consulting firms with similar offshore arrangements. Maya nodded, closing the Henderson Industries file. "The network was bigger than we initially suspected. Blackwood wasn't just running isolated schemes. This was systematic corruption across multiple firms. Your documentation of the discriminatory practices has also caught the attention of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission," Rodriguez continued. "They're launching a broader investigation into hiring and promotion patterns at Chicago's major consulting firms." The institutional changes extending beyond Sterling & Associates validated months of careful intelligence gathering. Maya's experience demonstrated how individual acts of prejudice often masked larger systems of exclusion and corruption. That afternoon, Maya received an unexpected visitor. Jennifer from accounting appeared in the FBI lobby, having requested a meeting through official channels. The kind woman who'd first hinted at financial irregularities looked nervous, but determined as she was escorted to a secure conference room. "Dr. Washington," Jennifer said, still adjusting to Maya's real identity, I wanted to thank you personally for what you've done. Maya gestured for Jennifer to sit. You provided crucial support during the investigation. Your observations about unusual financial patterns helped confirm our suspicions. Jennifer's relief was obvious. I'd been documenting irregularities for 2 years, but I didn't know who to trust with the information. When I saw how Blackwood treated you, I realized you might be someone who understood what it felt like to be underestimated. Your instincts were correct, Maya replied. The discrimination I experienced was connected to larger ethical violations throughout the firm. Jennifer reached into her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. These are copies of financial records I saved before the federal seizure. Transactions dating back 3 years that show the Henderson connection was just the beginning. Maya accepted the documents with professional gratitude. This evidence could be instrumental in prosecuting the broader conspiracy. I'm testifying before the grand jury next week, Jennifer said. It feels good to finally speak the truth about what I witnessed. Their conversation was interrupted by Maya's phone, buzzing with a text message from Tyler. Coffee tomorrow? All 5 of us want to see you. Maya smiled, realizing her former colleagues were still processing her revealed identity while maintaining the friendships they developed during their shared internship experience. The next morning, Maya met Tyler, Rebecca, Elena, David, and Marcus at a coffee shop near Northwestern University. The atmosphere was different now, respectful rather than protective, curious rather than sympathetic. They understood they were having coffee with a federal agent who'd successfully infiltrated a major criminal organization. We've been talking, Rebecca said without preamble, about what your investigation means for our future careers. Maya set down her coffee cup, understanding their concerns. How so? David leaned forward. We're all going into consulting or finance. Your case has shown us how easy it is for firms to hide criminal activity behind professional facades. Elena nodded agreement. We want to know how to recognize red flags, how to protect ourselves if we encounter similar situations. Tyler's expression was serious. You've shown us that integrity isn't just about personal ethics, it's about institutional responsibility. Maya felt proud of their thoughtful response to her investigation. The most important lesson is that discrimination and financial corruption often coexist. Firms that exclude people based on prejudice are usually hiding other ethical violations. Marcus asked the question they'd all been considering. How do we make sure we never become complicit in systems like Sterling and Associates? Ask questions, Maya replied immediately. Challenge assumptions. Support colleagues who face unfair treatment. Most importantly, trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed Maya a news article. The consulting industry is implementing new compliance standards because of your case. Mandatory bias training, financial transparency requirements, and whistleblower protections. Maya scanned the article with professional satisfaction. Institutional change requires both legal pressure and cultural transformation. Your generation of professionals can ensure these reforms actually work. Elena's voice carried newfound determination. We've decided to stay in touch, to support each other as we enter our careers. What happened at Sterling and Associates showed us how important it is to have allies who'll stand up for what's right. The conversation continued for 2 hours, covering topics from federal investigative techniques to corporate ethics to the psychological impact of maintaining undercover identities. Maya found herself genuinely enjoying the discussion, appreciating how her colleagues had transformed their shock into thoughtful analysis. As they prepared to leave, Tyler asked one final question. Do you regret the deception, having to lie to people who genuinely cared about you? Maya considered her response carefully. Undercover work requires difficult choices, but seeing how you all responded to injustice, without knowing who I really was, proved that integrity exists even in corrupt environments. That evening, Maya received a call from Special Agent Chen with an update on the broader investigation. Blackwood's plea negotiations have stalled. His attorneys are claiming he was following standard industry practices. Maya wasn't surprised. What about the other firms Rodriguez mentioned? 3 additional arrests are planned for next week. Your Sterling and Associates investigation has opened up a network of financial crimes spanning 5 years in multiple states. Maya felt the satisfaction that came with successful long-term investigations. The discrimination documentation will be crucial for establishing patterns of institutional bias that enabled the financial crimes. The Justice Department is considering this case as a model for future investigations into corporate corruption. Chen continued. Your methodology of connecting discriminatory practices to financial violations could reshape how we approach white-collar crime. After ending the call, Maya stood at her apartment window, overlooking Lake Michigan. The city lights reflected on the dark water, creating patterns that shifted with the waves. Her investigation had begun with suspicions about financial irregularities at a single consulting firm. It was ending with federal charges that would transform an entire industry. But perhaps more importantly, her experience had demonstrated that standing up to discrimination, whether as a federal agent gathering evidence or as colleagues supporting someone they believed was being treated unfairly, remained one of the most powerful tools for exposing corruption and creating lasting change. Tomorrow would bring grand jury testimony, media interviews, and continued preparation for trials that could last months. But tonight, Maya felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served not through dramatic confrontations, but through patient documentation, careful analysis, and the courage to maintain dignity in the face of systematic prejudice. 6 months later, Maya stood before a packed auditorium at the FBI Academy in Quantico, addressing new recruits about undercover operations in the intersection of civil rights enforcement with financial crimes investigation. The Blackwood case had become required study material for federal agents, demonstrating how discrimination often signals deeper institutional corruption. The greatest weapon against prejudice isn't anger, Maya told the assembled trainees. It's competence, patience, and the quiet determination to document truth until justice becomes inevitable. In the audience, she spotted familiar faces from her Chicago assignment. Tyler had joined the FBI's white-collar crime division after completing his MBA. Rebecca was working with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, investigating discriminatory practices at major corporations. Elena had become a compliance officer, using her experience to prevent the kind of violations that destroyed Sterling and Associates. Richard Blackwood had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, his conviction setting precedent for prosecuting discrimination as evidence of broader criminal conspiracy. The consulting firm bearing his name no longer existed, its assets distributed among fraud victims and civil rights organizations. But Maya's true victory wasn't measured in prison sentences or seized assets. It was reflected in the faces of young professionals who'd learned that integrity wasn't negotiable, that standing up for others wasn't optional, and that systematic change required both institutional accountability and individual courage. David had sent her a photo the previous week, his new business card reading Chief Ethics Officer at a Fortune 500 company. Marcus was teaching business ethics at his alma mater, using the Sterling and Associates case to show students how quickly professional reputations could be destroyed by moral compromises. The consulting industry had implemented sweeping reforms following Maya's investigation. Mandatory bias training, financial transparency requirements, and whistleblower protections were now standard across major firms. Federal oversight had increased, with regular audits designed to prevent the kind of systematic corruption that had flourished under Blackwood's leadership. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, the accountant whose courage had provided crucial evidence. Promoted to CFO today. First woman of color in company history. Thank you for showing me that speaking up was worth the risk. After her presentation, Maya walked across the academy grounds, reflecting on how a routine investigation into financial crimes had evolved into something much larger. Her experience demonstrated that federal law enforcement was most effective when it addressed not just criminal behavior, but the cultural attitudes that enabled corruption to flourish. Agent Rodriguez approached as she reached her car. The Justice Department wants you to lead a new task force on corporate discrimination and financial crimes. Interested? Maya smiled, understanding that her next assignment would build on everything she'd learned during those 3 months as an undercover intern. When do we start? Next Monday. We're investigating a tech company in Silicon Valley, where several whistleblowers have reported both gender discrimination and cryptocurrency fraud. As Maya drove away from Quantico, she thought about the young woman who might be sitting in that tech company right now, watching inappropriate behavior and suspicious financial transactions, wondering if anyone would believe her concerns or take action on her reports. That woman deserved an advocate, someone who understood that discrimination and corruption were often two sides of the same coin. She deserved a system that wouldn't dismiss her observations because of her age, gender, or background. Maya had learned that real power wasn't about commanding rooms or demanding respect. It was about using your skills, knowledge, and determination to create opportunities for others to succeed. It was about ensuring that the next person who faced discrimination would find allies ready to stand up for what was right. The highway stretched ahead toward her next assignment, her next chance to prove that justice could prevail when courage met competence. Somewhere in Silicon Valley, another investigation was waiting to begin. Because the fight for equality and accountability never truly ended. It just found new battlegrounds and new champions willing to stand firm against those who believed power meant never having to answer for their actions. Maya Washington was ready for whatever came next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.